Hello, everyone. I'm Mary Ann Shuko, a co-founder and manager at allsauthors.com. We are the global community of authors writing about Alzheimer's and dementia from personal experience to light the way for others. We're pleased to be partnered with HFC to present this summer reading series featuring our authors. Welcome to the third and final in our 2022 sessions, this time featuring Christy Byrne Yates and her inspiring book, Building a Legacy of Love, Thriving in the Sandwich Generation. Thank you for sharing some of your precious time with us. I'd like to introduce some of the members of our management team who are here with us today, and that would be Vicki Tapia. You can say hello, Vicki. And our HFC associate, Amanda. Hi, Amanda. Thanks for putting it together. First, a little housekeeping. This event is being recorded and it will be posted to our YouTube channel and on our Untangling Alzheimer's and Dementia podcast. If you prefer not to be seen, please turn off your camera. All participants are muted. If you have a question for Christy, please write it in the chat window at the bottom of your screen. And our moderator, Amanda, or I will be checking the chat, and we may call on you to ask the question yourself if you'd like to. Otherwise, we will ask the question. So let's get started. I want to welcome Christy Byrne Yates. If you've attended any of the other sessions this summer, you know that Christy was the moderator. And this time we're turning the tables and I'm going to be asking her the questions. And she's been in Al's Authors for a number of years now, and has written a helpful caregiver guide specifically for the sandwich generation, but she has a lot to share with us. So hi, Christy, welcome.
Hi. Good to see everybody.
Yeah, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself? Like, what is your career background?
Sure. So a little bit about me. I'm currently in Dublin, Ireland right now. I've got two children who are adults now. So one of them, my daughter, is going to be here for a year studying. So we came over to have fun helping her settle in and find an apartment, which is turning out to be a lot. It's because there's a bit of a housing crisis. Career-wise, my background is really in counseling psychology and school psychology specifically. So I spent the last 20 years in education, the last 15 as a school psychologist in California and a licensed educational psychologist in California. But prior to that, I worked with a number of different communities that had special needs and did a lot of program development, a lot of case management, a lot of crisis management. But I have to tell you, even with all of that, I was never prepared for what was coming my way as a sandwich generation caregiver or a caregiver of parents with dementia. I don't know that there's a way to get that started, but yes, that's me.
Yes, so you had the two-parent, what do they call it? Double dementia duty? The two-parent?
I did have double dementia duty.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. So, like many people, I wasn't specifically prepared for the challenges that came my way. And like many people, the majority of the responsibility fell to me through circumstance. I lived 10 minutes away from my parents, and my siblings were many states away. So it wasn't that I was more prepared or better able. It was that I was here. And this sometimes happens to people, right? You're there. And so you get the job. And like many people, I was a working parent. So I was working full time. My husband was working full time, and our kids were middle school and high school age when my parents started needing a lot more work, a lot more help. They were, my dad was diagnosed with vascular dementia. He'd had some strokes he had a massive stroke when he was 60, recovered fairly well, but then started having little TIAs in his mid 70s, and then really started to have a lot of challenges in his late 70s. My mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, and we weren't prepared for that either. And I have to say, like a lot of people do, I was in denial for a long time. I was so busy. I was taking care of them, but I was busy, and I kept making excuses and kept overlooking it and over-explaining why my mom was forgetting so many things, rather than really coming to that sort of place. But yes, they both had dementia, and sadly died 7 weeks apart in 2015. It was a really tough summer, and it was all of that that really made me think about many of the things I put into the book. But that was sort of my caregiving journey. My parents did elect themselves to go to assisted living. They had planned that long before they ever had any of these circumstances come up. So that's something I talk about in my book too, is that future planning that my parents had done, which was a gift to us. And that's why I felt that was a legacy of love they passed on to us.
Yeah, and that was a gift, and it was very wise on their part. I'm wondering if, your background as a psychologist, did that help you at all? Did it give you like a little bit of more of an up than somebody else might have had with these situations?
That's a great question. I think when I eventually embraced this, when I finally got to, oh, all right, here's where we are, then I really, yes, that was a great help to me. I could understand what I needed to do a little bit more. I had a plan, and so because I was a school psychologists usually work in special education. That's usually what we do, and we diagnose different kinds of disabilities that might impair learning, and then build a plan to help students with that so that they can take advantage of all the other kinds of learning that they can do. And I just thought, oh my gosh, I need to put my parents on an IEP. So that was the way I framed it in my head. So because I had that framework, that helped me to think about what to do. But I know that not everybody's a school psychologist, but we all have frameworks that help us feel safe. And so when we can wrap our head around some sort of framework, we can kind of then start to work through what needs to be done. But yeah, you know what, Marianne, it did help me. It also made me more aware of really the significance of their deficits, right? Like I could really see things. And when I saw it through that lens, I was like, geez, I'm really seeing them diminish right before my eyes at times. It was good and bad, but I think it was a real helpful thing in terms of like crisis management and case management. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I know in my journey with my parents, being a nurse and being a case manager,
Yes.
and I had spent, years counseling other families on how to handle this situation. When it hit me, I like forgot everything I knew. And I was just
Right.
like in the panic mode, and it's hard to even believe that's happening. And you think maybe it's not really, I'm just making something out of nothing. But then, of course, when the verdicts come in from the physicians and the specialists and everything, that this is really the case.
Yeah.
Remember reverting back to my nursing cap and my case management cap and saying, okay, well, what would I have told, this patient's family if they were my patients? What would I
Yeah.
have said to them, and where would I have sent them? And so that really helped me a lot. And then it helped me too to explain to, the other family members and what was going on, because they
Right.
knew that I knew a little more than they did, or a lot more than they did. And then they trusted me too. So it made a huge difference
Exactly.
having
Yeah.
that background, but not everybody has it. And
Right. Exactly. And
um,
we all find what we can fall back on, but for sure it was something that did help me at times. And I think once I got through that denial piece, and I
mm,
think that was hard to, and but I have to say, and I don't know if you experienced this, when I finally got to the place of, and this was really early in my mom's disease, right before she was diagnosed, and other people were saying, she's forgetting a whole lot. And I was, oh, she's just stressed about my dad, That was what I chalked it up to. And when I finally wrapped my head around it then I felt guilty. Like I should have known, I should have known. So I had to stop shoulding on myself was really the biggest thing. And that was a piece that I also learned along the way, is that that's not helpful at all. So, yeah.
right. Yeah. So tell us how you define the terms the sandwich generation. What exactly does that mean? And did you realize that this defined your situation while you were living it, or did that come later?
Yeah, yeah. Great question. I did not coin that term. That really was coined back in the 1980s by a social worker, and she was seeing patients that were coming to see her who had kids and aging parents and who were just really stressed out, super stressed out. So she just called it a sandwich generation, kind of sandwiched between two different generations, right? So it's kind of this wonky term, but it's out there, and it's kind of one of those terms that when you're in it, you know it. And that's absolutely right. I didn't really wasn't aware of that term till I was in it, and then I suddenly became aware of it. But it's typically the person who's in between raising some children in their home and then an aging loved one. It could be a parent, a grandparent, but just like sandwiches are really different. We have all different kinds of sandwiches. There's all different kinds of sandwich families, right? So it could be you have children who are adults, but maybe one of them has special needs themselves, and you're going to care for them for a lot longer than perhaps your other children. It could be that you have a spouse who's, so any kind of where you're squeezed between two different ends. And really the key thing is children and aging person, and or at least older person kind of thing. And if you feel squeezed, I think you're in a sandwich. So I don't get particular about that. For me, it was I was classic. I had kids at home I was raising, and I had two aging parents. And it's something that I didn't really understand and wasn't really aware of until I was in it, and then I learned a lot more since then, right? My awareness and the depths of my awareness have really become so much more deeper at this point, really looking at this whole cycle, this whole time period. So that's really what the sandwich generation is.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see where, it would be so hard to be trying to balance the needs of two totally distinct sets of people, or groups of people
Right.
with so many different needs and demands on you and on your time. And I mean, with your children, you expect these things. You expect that they're going to go to school,
Right.
you have to prepare them, and they're going to come home, and someone needs to be there, and you're going to make dinner and help with homework and go to sports and help them with all of their issues. But then on the other side, now you have an older parent or someone with other needs that's an adult now, also depending on you to fulfill some of the
Right.
requirements of their activities of daily living. And that it must be like intense, especially if they're not even in your house.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you're
And what you're talking about,
Mm.
what you're talking about there, that dichotomy is really sort of, for me, was what was most challenging, right? And you spoke to something that I think I point out in the book. With our children, we kind of have these milestones, and we've all heard about them. We've also been through them, right? We were teenagers once. We were young adults once. We remember some things. We remember that first heartbreak, or we remember having to start a new school or something, right? We've been through those milestones ourselves, and we kind of know, and everybody's talking about them anyway. But end of life is different for everyone. We don't know what our it's not like everybody goes through the same stage. Well, we'll all get this disease, or we'll all get this situation, or we don't know. And so it's all different, and we have to discover along the way, okay, what do I do about this? The other thing that's going on is there's just immense challenge as a parent, and there's also incredible joy. All those milestones feel joyful many times, right? And then on the other side, you're watching the decline of someone to some respects, and that's can be heartbreaking. So being caught in the middle there, you sort of, it is possible to hold immense joy and immense sadness in your heart at one time. And when you're in the sandwich generation, you get to know that, and you can survive it, but sometimes it just feels so isolating and so hard. And I think that's one of the other pieces that comes out of that time period. And so being able to talk about it more, I think, is really good for folks.
Yeah, I think that, there would be like some sense of confusion too, as to not realizing, well, which way am I supposed to feel at this time? I'm
Right.
really happy about my daughters going to the prom. Isn't this wonderful? But then when they leave, now I have to go over to the nursing home and make sure that, my father was fed
Yes.
and he's ready for bed. So you're
Yes.
going from like
Yes.
two extremes, emotional
Yes.
extremes all the time. And then I imagine, the interruptions in your normal like day, like if you're working or whatever, with having
Yeah.
interruptions from agencies or home
Yep.
care or whoever for you.
Right.
And
Right.
then at the same time juggling other things for your children on the other side, teachers and school assignments and extracurricular activities and going shopping and being there when they get off, when they come off the bus, or making sure that somebody is there, and just this never ending.
Yes.
I think it's probably like the never ending
Yeah.
day. Mm.
It's a lot of juggling. It's a lot of juggling, and yeah, definitely lots of bittersweet in there.
Yeah. So
So yeah.
could you describe some of the challenges that you encountered and how you resolved them? Something specific?
Yeah, I think my biggest challenges always felt like time and self-care. I never felt like I had enough time to do what I needed to do for all of the people and my work. And I know that I put myself on the back burner a lot. And that's not sustainable for very long. And I eventually figured that out. And that's one thing I do talk about in my book, but also when I'm talking to caregivers or groups, is that whole notion of putting yourself on the back burner feels so noble initially. And then you realize, I'm really messing it up for everybody else because I'm only coming at this game, at 50% now because I'm so worn out. I also had to learn to ask for help, which wasn't always easy for me. I was kind of a, working moms, we kind of do it all, we just get it done, right? And it was hard to ask for comfortable. There were times when the grief I felt for what my parents were going through really put a different flavor into my interactions with my kids, and that wasn't always great. And I needed to really be aware of that. It's that anticipatory grief that you might feel when you see someone in decline, because we all know where this is headed, right? We know where we're going, right? We all know there's going to be an end of life here, and I'm watching that in real time, and it feels so overwhelming. And for me, it showed up in anxiety and stress and short tempers and things like that. And that's not healthy for my kids. So really knowing how to take care of myself so that I could show up for my kids as the best mom I could be, rather than, I can only operate at 10% for you guys right now. And how do I tell them that? How can I get their needs met when I couldn't maybe leave my parents, and vice versa, right? There were times when it was like, I had to make a choice between parent and child, and those were heartbreaking. And I talk about some of those instances in the book. And then I've said bittersweet already a number of times, but really those, really wonderful milestones like high school graduations, bittersweet because suddenly realizing grandma can't show up, she's not able to be here, or so on and so forth. And so all of that was difficult. I think the challenge too was, again, like I said, learning to ask for help and learning how to do that really specifically. So those are some of the challenges.
That seems to be a common problem for, I think, most caregivers, is asking for help. It's something that you might want to start practicing early on, or when people
For
volunteer
sure.
to like take them up on it, call their bluff, find out what they're going to
Yes.
do, get them to do something for you. And, even children can help as well. They're not too young, and they're not beneath helping
No,
with the care.
it's actually really great for them. I mean, I don't want it to make it sound like children being aware of what's going on for you, even if it's sadness or grief or whatever it is, that's okay. It's just having conversations with your kids and making that a normal, natural thing. Like kids are resilient, and I see lots of opportunities where kids have been able to step in and help out. And I've reached out to caregiver groups and asked that question, and almost to a person, they've said, this has actually been an okay thing for my kids. They've learned a lot, and they help me a lot. It hasn't been like, oh, we should never tell children that grandparents are ill or aging or what have you. So yeah.
Yes, it's just part of the circle of life, because in what
Mhm.
happens in the grand scheme typically is that they become your caregiver or our caregivers later on in
Right.
our life. And so they've already had that example set for them.
Well, we're putting them through training, right? So that's
We
another
hope,
thing is,
we hope.
how, are they watching us caring for our parents? That was another thing, Marianne, is I had to really be aware of, oh my gosh, my kids were great teachers for me. There were times when they'd say, Mom, you're being really mean to grandma. And I had to realize, oh my gosh, they're watching me. I am training them how to take care of me someday. Am I training them well, or am I showing them
Right.
all the things you don't do, right? So, yeah.
That is so true. So what are some of the joys that you experienced on your journey? Anything in particular?
Oh, there were a lot of joys. For all of the heartache and difficulty, there were a lot of joys. I can wholeheartedly say that watching my children grow in empathy was incredible. And I've always seen compassion is really empathy in action. And they had that opportunity. It's one thing to say, oh, we should care about people. But if it's out there, they don't have to do it. But it was right there with them. They had to hold grandma's hand when she walked. They had to help grandpa into the wheelchair and get him to the next place. I mean, all those things. And I saw that with them. And I hear that, like I said, from other sandwich families too. And we heard it last month with Renee Harmon. She talked about her daughters learning, dealing with their father who had early onset, and how hard it was for them, but also how they then had lives of went into careers that were helping careers, caregiving kinds of careers, education, nursing. I mean, that's something I hear from other people too, is, and my daughter decided to go into caregiving, or she's going into geriatric nursing, or so on and so forth. So the other thing is, I really cherish the last years that I had with my mom and dad. They were really special. And I'm so grateful I had the opportunity to be with them when they needed me, and that I could just hold their hand at really hard times, and know that I was providing some comfort. I mean, it kind of brings me to tears thinking about that. It was really a beautiful thing to be able to offer them and to be present to them at that time. And then, like I said, I learned to ask things from my siblings, and I had good relationships with my siblings already. I think we found some richer conversations through this time, and that was good. And we have since. We have found richer, deeper conversations since. And that can only be a good thing in my mind. So I see that as being some of the joyful things that came out of this time.
Well, that's certainly another gift that
Mm-hmm.
you receive
Yep.
from your parents, is that we have a comment here from Nicole Smith. She mentions, and you mention in your book about how caregiving help from others can create positive endorphins for the helpers. They actually benefit from helping.
Right. Yeah. And I think I put that in my book. There are research studies about this, that they have researchers have found that consistent small acts of caregiving release endorphins, oxytocin, some other hormones that are really great for our brains, and they are also healthy for our hearts. And so, really caregiving can be beneficial in many ways, right? So we definitely hear about how hard it is on caregivers and the stress levels. And so when we can find the appropriate supports for caregivers, then we can see more of that happening, right? So it is important to remember it's not all, terrible stuff. There's something that comes out of that can be really wonderful for us too. So even physically, and yeah, in our brains, when we have those kinds of hormones activated, for sure.
And we know that new mothers have that as well,
Yes.
when they're
Right.
bonding with their baby and during the
Mm-hmm.
postpartum period. So
Yeah.
that's nature taking care of us.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, what would you say are the top 3 concerns that sandwich caregivers must consider during their journeys? Top 3 concerns of a sandwich caregiver.
So I think I have 4. So I'm
Oh,
going to cheat and I'm going to give you 4.
Sure.
No, for sure, number one, taking care of yourself physically, emotionally, and spiritually, right? I paid attention to this, as I said, more towards the end because I had to, because I was suffering and I needed to take care of that. So I took more time for me. And I actually even had a vacation with my family. I hadn't in many years, right? Like, maybe we got away for a weekend or something, but we actually took a week-long vacation. I had people come in and cover. It was so important for us, and it was great for me. I really needed that. Balancing the needs of children and parents is really tough. So, and every family may see this differently. So I think my point on this one is find times when you can have these conversations earlier rather than later, right? Because you have to learn how to also allow other people to come in and care for someone. It might be for your kids. It might be that, another adult, could be a neighbor, could be a family member, could be, well, typically it wouldn't be just anybody come take care of your kids, but right, you might use that carpool, right, that you didn't before. Maybe you always did this with your child, and maybe now you need to let go and let them be with another adult because you needed to be somewhere else. That's something you have to get used to, and learning how to make those choices. For me, it was also when I needed time away, I had to let go of the fact that my brother or my sister wouldn't do things for my mom and dad the same way I did them. And that was going to be okay. Like, just like when you left your kids when they were little and you were like, and they do this and they do this. And full well when you left, the babysitter just did what they needed to do, right? And this kid survived. So it was the same thing with my parents. And I had to remind myself of that. So balancing needs. Financial constraints is number 3. I think you really have to, again, this is one where you have to have conversations long before you need to. I mean, think about it. We're here talking about people who have Alzheimer's, dementias, other kinds of dementias. And if we waited till our family member needed to talk about certain things, they might not be able to talk about those things. So we need to have those conversations long before we have to have them. And I will tell you this, my husband and I, when we started really doing a lot of care for my parents, that's when we started taking care of our own stuff. We kind of looked at each other and said, look what your parents have, Christy. They have this all written. They have a trust. They have things written out. They've got a plan. We need to have a plan. Let's have a plan. So that was a really good wake-up call. I wanted to give my kids the legacy of love my parents gave me, which was, I knew what they wanted at the end of their life. I knew they had enough money to care for themselves. I knew they had plans about who would do what. I didn't have to think about anything. I just had to be there for them and make sure those things were executed. So that's a really important thing. And then I guess 4, along with financial constraints, is that end of life wishes. Like, I didn't have to guess. I knew what my parents wanted. My dad was a veteran. He wanted to be, they both wanted to be cremated, and my dad wanted to be interned at a national cemetery. Done deal. Everything was, I didn't have to think about anything. I didn't have to pick anything out. I didn't have to plan. I knew what they wanted. And it was just a matter of making sure those things happened. And so that was really, really helpful.
Yeah, that is helpful. My parents, we visited an attorney and they put all those things in writing and they put down those last final wishes, and then they changed their minds afterward.
Yeah.
So they told
and
me,
you can, right?
oh, we don't want to be cremated, they said. So it's fine, just make sure everybody else knows. So when I don't do it,
Well, exactly.
they don't
Exactly.
get to come at me.
So my husband and I actually just went through working with our estate attorney to update everything, because our kids are now adults. And, 10 years ago when we did this, we were identifying who they would go to and what would happen here. Well, now they're, 25 and 22. We updated everything, and we had really frank conversations with them about what our thoughts were on things, because you know, it was important for them to be involved too. And I see Nicole's thing, your 18-year-old should have that. You know what, Nicole, we did that when they were 18 too, because I'd been through this with my parents. We actually had them write out some things. And we used a couple different documents that they could use. So yes, absolutely. And there's, I'm not an estate planning attorney. I'm not a financial consultant, but I would say consult one, because that's really important. And yes, your 18-year-old can do that too. And we don't want to do that because we feel weird, but it's really important. It's a life lesson. So anyway, yeah, those were some of those things that I think were important.
Yeah, that's very true. And it is a good idea to revisit the plan every few years, because things change and your attitude might
Yes.
change, or your financial position might change. You know, a lot of stuff can happen, and you want to make sure everything is up to date.
Yes, absolutely.
So, other than all of that, something maybe a little more practical, what was the most crucial piece of advice that you received during your journey, which you learned from someone else that really helped you?
Um, I've learned a lot of things. I think the advice I think that I got was definitely being very specific about what I needed. I was used to, you know, being more of a people pleaser. It's interesting because as a school psychologist, I was very focused and I could help other people do this. But in my own life, I didn't want to ask for help that way. I didn't think I needed it. And now here I needed it. And I needed to be really just brass tacks and be specific. And I'll be clear about that. One of the things I did is I had a conversation with each of my siblings one-on-one, and I told them what I needed from them. And what I said is, I need your support. They couldn't be here physically. I'm in California. My parents are in California. My sister was in Montana, or is in Montana. My brother's in Michigan. They weren't going to be able to run over and take care of mom and dad on a dime, right? I needed their support. And what support looked like and sounded like for me was, I wanted to be able to vent when I needed to vent. And if I needed advice, I could say, and now I'm asking for advice. But I didn't want advice when I was venting.
Mm-hmm.
And when I did want advice, I wanted to hear it really clearly. And if they needed to take time to think about it, I also didn't want to be second guessed. I needed to know that they trusted me. So we talked about it. We talked about what I was doing. I let them know. And I want to be really clear about that. So anybody who's listening, you may not have that kind of relationship with your siblings. I have to tell you, I didn't have this relationship with them before this either. It was one I had to build. And that was what was really important to me, because I heard from people about how this was going to be really difficult working with siblings. I'm lucky that my siblings were kind and fair people. Neither one of them had any nefarious backgrounds. You know, a good friend of mine had a sibling who was in and out of jail. Probably wasn't going to be the person she was going to call on for help on a regular basis, right? But for me, I had really highly functional siblings. But I also know people get involved with other people's stuff sometimes. And what I found is I had to be very clear and specific. And when I set those boundaries, then they knew what they could do for me, and I could say, okay, I'm going to stop you there. That's enough. I'm on overload on advice. So let me just chew on that for a little bit. But I made a distinction between, here's me venting and here's me asking for advice, because I needed both of those opportunities and I needed their trust. So that was a really important piece of advice that I got from a number of different people and professionals. So that was really helpful.
Yeah, that is very helpful. We have a comment again from Nicole.
Yeah.
She said her sister made every piece of the situation 100 times worse. We used to have a decent relationship, not anymore. Did you want to elaborate on that, Nicole, and to join the discussion, or are you okay?
I can. I don't. So, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Why don't you share?
Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, I just, she just is a drama queen, and we were doing this cross country, and she just made everything about her and made everything we were trying to do 100. Yeah. I know. That's why I had to hire an elder care attorney and get everything legalized, follow the protocol, because Yeah, and the attorney told me, he said that it's same play, different actor. So my brother had left the scene a long time ago, so he was just dormant and out of the picture, which was fine. But my sister wanted to make everything about her. She wanted the power, she wanted the money, she wanted the attention, and it was horrible. So yeah.
Yeah, we hear that story a lot, and there actually are books in our collection, I think, that touch on that as well, and how people had situations. There are situations like that that are being lived right now in real time on Twitter. If you're on Twitter and you follow Alzheimer's, you can see people tweeting about that situation, like giving you like the day-to-day drama. It's very common.
Yeah. It's very common. It's very hard. And I think, Nicole, one of the things you did was because you consulted an attorney and were able to put things in writing, that's a great step. And a lot of times people, there are a lot of reasons why someone might not be able to, might be financial, could be, they, for whatever reason, can't access an attorney. But what you can do is the best you can do is to try and do that kind of thing, because when you're clear and you can set those boundaries, and that doesn't make it perfect and it doesn't solve the problem, because drama kind of finds people, as you know, and I can't say that I didn't have drama. It's just, I know that's one of the things I learned was I had to be very specific, because just saying support wasn't enough. I needed to tell them what it sounded like, what it looked like, and then I had to be just very concrete about that. So that was what helped me.
Yeah. Did anybody else want to share their sibling story while we're on sibling? No? Yeah, I was fortunate because my siblings, deferred to me of being the big sister, like the oldest and the only girl. That, in my opinion, the best spot in the family. But they didn't have any real criticisms or complaints about what was happening, and just trusted me, which was a blessing, because I know that it can be very difficult with the second guessing or the agendas, the hidden agendas that people have. And there I encountered that very often. There were sometimes very ugly things going on, very ugly things that, wow, you can't believe that people treat their parents that way, or their siblings, but they do.
Exactly. So, I mean, I want to be really clear, and I think I state this very early on in the book. I had a very privileged situation, right? We weren't a wealthy family, but my parents had saved a lot for their retirement. They were that Depression era folk who did that, right? They took care of things. And so luckily they had enough to be able to care for some things, and they had insurance policies and things like that. And they had thought about what they wanted. But it's still hard. And I know a lot of people who the money becomes the biggest concern. There may be siblings or people who are able to care for themselves, and others who are not as deft at that, and that can interfere with how they're showing up to help, and it doesn't look like help. And talking to my parents' financial planner, they were also very supportive, and they kept it very clean how we did things. So that was important. But I do hear the horror stories. It's pretty devastating at times. And I think if you are the caregiver, going back to taking care of yourself, making sure your needs are met, and then your next person to take care of is, you really are splitting that between your parent and your child. And there are going to be times when your child's going to have to come first because they're your child and they need you. And then there are going to be times when maybe it's okay for your kid to be with someone else at this point because your parent needs you, and you have to make those decisions. And those are really hard decisions.
Yeah, for sure.
One of the stories that I open with is my father had passed away. It's about maybe 5 weeks after, and my son was getting ready to go from California to back east for college. And my husband and I were going to take him back to college. He's our oldest. We were going to take him to college. I was looking forward to that. And then my mother went into the hospital. It wasn't life-threatening, but I had to be there with her. And we found out that she had this condition that would later be what actually took her life. But I felt horrified that I took her back to where she lived. She was living in an assisted living. As I said, she wasn't on immediate death at this point, but what do I do? You know, my son, my mother. And honestly, what I thought of, Marianne, was what would if my mother were if my mother were here and not having Alzheimer's, what would she tell me? And she would tell me, you go with your son. What are you kidding me? Go, Christy, go. Right. So I did. And I called my brother, I called my sister, called my aunt and uncle, and people came in and visited my mom we were gone for maybe 4 days. It was really heartbreaking for me, but I'm so glad I did. I'm so glad I did. It was important for my son. It was important for my husband. It was important for me. So yeah, really hard.
Yeah, you don't realize, you know, the kind of rules that you fulfill as the mother, you know, until you get into a situation like that. You know, I just take it for granted, but you're just such a pivotal person in all of these lives. And my mother was
Yeah.
the same thing, you know, she was a
Yeah.
selfless person as well. So I can hear your mom telling you, go.
And I know that if things were different, if my mom was on, you know, the last moments of her life, I would not have left, obviously. But it was just the fact leaving her and knowing that she now had this condition. She had a recurrence of cancer, so that was really hard to know. But there wasn't going to be anything we could really. She'd had breast cancer, she'd had a mastectomy, was cancer-free for many, many years, and then by this time had developed some cancer cells that created a pleural effusion around her lung, kind of manifested like pneumonia. But we didn't know. So, and then the doctor and I had a real heart-to-heart about what are we going to do? Are we going to do aggressive treatment? She's 83. She has Alzheimer's. Her husband just died. What are we going to do? What do you want to do? You know, and it was a really tough decision too. So those are those decisions you have to come to. Yeah.
Yeah, they're really hard. So let's talk a little bit about the book. What led you
Yeah.
to write the book in the first place?
Great. This is a great question. So I wrote the book because when I went back to work after my mother died, people started asking me, they were like coming out of the woodwork, hey, tell me what you did about this, tell me what you did about that. Or they'd say, oh, I'm in your shoes now. You know, we just put my dad on hospice. And I would hear this over and over again. And I realized people are just not talking about this, and they want to know, right? So I started thinking about it, and I started having conversations with people, and that was really what I wrote the book for, was to start conversations, to tell a little bit about my story, to do a little bit of research about what is this time period anyway, and what are we going through, and kind of look at, you know, like, here are some things to think about, right? I don't offer any specific financial advice or specific legal advice, but I certainly do recommend get that expert advice, because you're going to need it long before you know. And my one big thing is, again, what's the legacy you're leaving for your children? Because that's the piece that I didn't find in books. I didn't find books or articles or supports about what about your kids too. So I do try to talk a little bit about, you know, again, taking care of yourself is going to have a really positive impact on your kids. We think self-care is selfish sometimes, but you know what? It's role modeling for your children that when you start taking care of yourself, that's a good thing, right? And I even recommend more of a family wellness approach, right? If we had that be a normal thing that we do, like, hey, taking care of yourself is a really healthy thing to do. Setting boundaries is a really healthy thing to do. If our kids see us doing that in real time, it's going to make it really easy for them to learn how to do that in real time. So maybe they won't wait till it's a crisis point and they're starting to learn how to say no, like I did. I waited, you know. So it's one of those things. So that's really why I wrote the book, as kind of a heads up, and also kind of hopefully having that conversation to be about, even though this feels like a heartbreaking time, it really is an opportunity for families to pass along those legacies of love. How we treat one another, how we care for our children, and how we care for our elderly, those kinds of things. So that's really why I put the book out there.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about how it's structured?
Right. So I open with each chapter. In each chapter, there is some sort of personal story, something that with me and my family, or ways I was thinking about some things. But I really do start with a little bit of research about what is kind of, what are the demographics of this sandwich generation. There's estimated about, many years ago now, I can't believe 2016 is many years ago, but that was one of the earliest researches I found. The Pew Research Center said there was 47% of Americans were in the sandwich generation. As of the last census, it's at least 50% or more, and of those people, many of those people are also contributing quite a bit of their own financial support to their parents. So it's gotten worse. It's gotten really difficult for people. And this pandemic is going to have shifted a lot of things anyway. So it's sort of, there's an anomaly here with that too, because we lost so many elderly through the pandemic. But this is all kind of what I go into in the beginning. And then I really talk a little bit about who you are as a parent and how that's different from being a caregiver, right? Because your parents aren't really toddlers, even though it feels like it sometimes. And how do you have to shift your way of being with them? And then how do you incorporate that with your kids? And so I just kind of address different things. So, I do have the book with me, but I don't have it right in front of me. But I do talk about money. I do talk about legal issues. I talk about self-care. I have a chapter called Ruthless Self-Care, because I really feel like as parents, we ruthlessly take care of our kids, but we don't ruthlessly take care of ourselves. So I want to advocate for, just being able to put yourself first sometimes. But it's a mix of my memoir and then just real life information. Okay, so kind of blending of genres. It's self-help and memoir all in one. It's a little bit for everybody.
Yeah, many of our books are written that way. They're all based on real experience. So I think that's what readers are looking for. They don't want someone who hasn't walked the walk give the talk. They want to hear it from somebody who's been there and done it. So I think that's really important and distinctive. But you said you have the book, but it's not at hand, because I was going to ask you to read from it. But you don't have to.
I don't have it in front of me. I'm trying to think where I have it so I can tell somebody to go get it for me. Or otherwise I might be able to bring something up. But go ahead. You can ask me another question. I'll see if I can find it.
Well, what's next for you? What are your plans for the future? You recently retired, so we can start there.
I did. It's been great.
Yeah,
it's been great. I'm getting to travel. You know what? I am now doing a lot. I have actually done a lot more research since writing the book. Hey, look at that. My friendly friend just gave me my book. Got it. So I can read something.
Yeah, that's cool. Thank you.
Yeah, isn't that great? See how that happened? Manifesting. I just asked for it and there it came. So right now I'm really continuing to focus on starting conversations, because that's really what I want to do. I do feel like that specific lens of looking at kids and how this impacts them isn't as rich as some of I found books that would help a lot of things. You as a caregiver and your aging parent or aging loved one. But looking at that dynamic of how this impacts kids, I think is a place where I want to do more research. And I've actually been talking with researchers in this area. So there isn't anything specific to sandwich generation, but there is research on children who are serving as caregivers. That happens quite a lot more than we're aware of. And we have kids who come to school who maybe had to, feed grandma, change grandma's diaper before she came to school. And, how does that help? And how does that impact her during the school day? I mean, all those things are happening for our kids. And so where are the support systems for our children? This is not a bad thing that they're caring for someone. It's just helping them have a place to make sense out of it and be able to talk about it when they need to. And then also for us to realize as the parent, again, when we take care of our mental health, we're going to show up as much better parents. And so we need to get any help we need. If we need to get therapy, talk to a coach, go to a support group, whatever it's going to help us be able to then show up and really be present to our kids is going to be better for them. It's going to be better for the person we're caring for. So those kinds of things are what I'm really passionate about right now and what I'm doing. So I'm doing a lot of these kinds of podcasts, loving working with everybody at Al's Authors and trying to come up with different things. And so that's been a real joy for me. And I also have a support group that I do by Zoom. And we are celebrating this last month. July was a year that I started that, a year ago, and haven't lost a person. Nobody ever misses. I mean, it's been rare that anybody missed a time, because what they're telling me is this is the one time every week where I kind of get my fill of I'm normal, I'm okay. And we laugh, we cry, we talk about all of it. And, we're hearing about where each other's family member is at this point. And it's just, it can feel so isolating, right? Mm-hmm. So those are the things I'm doing right now.
Oh, that's all wonderful. Okay, so you're going to read for us? You have something picked up?
I'll find something for you. Yeah. So I'm going to read something really from the end to kind of be a little bit more uplifting here. So this time in the sandwich generation is rich. The lessons we learn don't reveal themselves right away. Our memories gently age and shift, and we learn to let go of the painful times and move beyond grief. After some time, we can look back and try to make sense of it all. A year or so after my parents' passing, I was able to forgive myself for times I wasn't my best as a daughter, sibling, parent, or spouse. I could acknowledge that I'd done my best and not beat myself up. I became a better parent too, connecting again with my children as young adults who had been through the journey with me. We still talk a lot of Grandma and Grandpa, and my children have been willing and supportive consultants on this book. With time, I could also see how I had changed for the better. I learned a lot of lessons from my parents. One of the best gifts they gave me was planning for the end of their lives. They made the tough choices so their children didn't have to. Assisted living, cremation services, burial at a national cemetery, Catholic Mass. They also put enough money aside for their care. My siblings and I didn't have to accrue debt, and that was, for us, the gift of freedom. We were and are lucky. This isn't the case for everyone. My husband and I have spent time trying to do the same for our children. We talk about our wishes for future, for end of life. We try to normalize conversations about end-of-life issues so that our kids can ask questions or at least feel comfortable knowing we are not leaving everything up to them. But we don't know exactly what tough choices they will still have to make. Which one of them will have that painful car key conversation with us? We also emphasize our value of compassion. How does compassion continue to show up in their lives? How are we continuing to be compassionate with others in our lives? What I learned while writing this book, through the tears and the frustrations, is that people naturally want to give and want to have a way to contribute to others. I probably already knew this, but it was driven home as I wrote this book. I look back on how much my parents gave me, but also how much my children have given me and the contributions made by others. You will take many gifts from this journey. May it be a legacy of love.
I love that. That's awesome. So where can people find your book, and where can they find you on the World Wide Web?
Yep. Pretty much everywhere. I'm Christy B. Yates. So it's Christy, because there are 5 million ways to spell the name Christy, but it's Christy. Usually there's a B in there for Byrne. Christy B. Yates, Yates. I'm in Ireland, so they want to spell it Yeats, but it's Yates. So ChristyYates.com is usually where you'll find my web, my online presence. And then I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter. So that's usually where you'll find me. I've been doing a lot more Instagram posts. So usually about things like this. I want to promote things Al's Authors is doing and other podcasts that I'm on, but that's where you'll find me.
And the book is available on Amazon.com and in the Al's
on Amazon
bookstore.
Yes, if you go to you can also elect on Amazon to have the Smiles thing, and you can have money go to Al's Authors. But yes, you can find it on Al's Authors website. It's on my website. It's on Amazon.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so does anybody have any questions? Any other questions? Let me look at everybody. I don't see any. Okay, then we can wrap it up. I want to thank you for attending the Summer Book Series for 2022. All the sessions will be uploaded to our YouTube channel and our podcast, and you can catch previous programs now. So if you ever missed anything, we go back like 3 summers. We've been doing this for a while. Find us on YouTube and on your favorite podcast platform. Coming in September, we're planning to an event, an All Authors Live virtual Q&A, Dementia Care Around the World, featuring several of our authors from across the globe, discussing the care available to them and their loved ones with dementia. This is a must-see for every dementia caregiver and others concerned about these conditions. It's good to see how are others doing this. So subscribe to our newsletter to register for this event on our website at allsauthors.com. And remember, you are not alone. One can sing a lonely song, but we chose to form a choir and create harmony. Thank you to the team at HFC for supporting this program and looking out for caregivers everywhere. Please follow them at wearehfc.org and across all social media platforms for caregiving support, insight on Alzheimer's and dementia, and more. Have a lovely evening.